Hello friends, my name is Ryan. I'm going to tell you a story named The Mirror Man, the reflection that wants to replace you, which is a very amazing story full of twists. So, let's start. There was once a small town nestled in the misty hills, where stories were as old as the mountains themselves. A place where every corner seemed to hold a secret, and every whisper in the wind carried a tale of mystery. It was in this very town that our story begins. It all started with a man named John. John was just an ordinary person, well, on the outside, at least. He lived alone in a modest house on the edge of town, his days spent working at a local factory, and his nights spent in solitude. The quiet was something he had grown used to, but it never really felt comforting. He felt, deep inside, that something was always missing. It wasn't loneliness. No, it was something darker, something lurking just out of sight. One evening, as John was cleaning his home, he came across an old, dusty mirror in the attic. It was framed in silver, tarnished with age, and looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to hang it in his living room. The moment it was placed on the wall, a strange chill filled the air, but John paid it no mind. After all, it was just a mirror, right? But soon, John started noticing something unusual. His reflection, something that had always been there without much thought, was starting to act differently. At first, it was subtle. A slight shift in his posture, a quick glance in the mirror, and seeing his reflection still holding a smile long after he had stopped. It was almost as if the mirror had a life of its own, one that was not entirely in sync with his own. John tried to shake off the unease, blaming it on exhaustion. But over the next few days, things only grew worse. His reflection didn't just mimic his movements anymore, it started doing things on its own. At times, when John would walk by the mirror, he'd catch his reflection staring back at him with a look that was far too intense, as though it were studying him, observing him, waiting for something. It wasn't long before the reflection began to take on a life of its own. John would find himself in a room, the reflection in the mirror moving faster than he could, as if it were trying to catch up with him, pushing to get closer, to replace him. One evening, as John sat at his kitchen table, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if the reflection wasn't just a reflection? What if it was something else? Something darker? A mirror image that wanted more than just to look at him, it wanted to be him. The more he thought about it, the more John's heart began to race. That night, he stayed up, staring at the mirror, watching for any sign of strange movement. And sure enough, as the clock struck midnight, he saw it, his reflection moved on its own, just like before. But this time, it wasn't just a movement. It was an action. The reflection smiled, and John felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Something was terribly wrong. John decided he had to confront this. The next morning, he gathered the courage to stand before the mirror and stare into his own eyes. He watched, breathless, as his reflection stared back at him. And then, something happened that he couldn't explain. His reflection smiled. But it was a smile that wasn't his. It was a twisted, malicious grin that seemed to mock him. A voice echoed in his mind, a whisper that was soft at first, but grew louder with every passing second. I am you, and you are me. You will be replaced. John recoiled, his heart racing. He felt the cold sweat on his brow as he stumbled backward. The mirror was no longer just a piece of glass, it was alive, and it wanted him. As the days passed, John began to feel like he was losing control of himself. The mirror's grip on him was tightening. He would catch glimpses of his reflection in the corner of his eye, and it would always be doing something different, something that he wasn't doing. At night, the reflection would appear to be standing still, staring at him, its eyes hollow, its smile twisted into something grotesque. And sometimes, John would hear soft whispers, words that made no sense, just a constant hum that seemed to grow louder with every passing night. Soon, the situation became unbearable. John could no longer tell where he ended and the reflection began. He was losing his grip on reality, unsure whether he was the one in control of his body or if it was the reflection that was calling the shots. He spent his days in a daze, the mirror in his living room always watching, always waiting. In a desperate attempt to break free, John tried everything. He covered the mirror with a blanket, but the moment he left the room, it would be uncovered again. He tried to destroy the mirror, smashing it with a hammer, but the cracks in the glass didn't seem to make any difference. No matter what he did, the reflection remained, watching, waiting. One night, as John lay in bed, he heard a sound, a soft rustling coming from the living room. His heart pounded in his chest as he slowly rose from the bed and tiptoed toward the source of the noise. There, in front of the mirror, stood his reflection, but it wasn't like before. It was alive. The figure in the mirror stepped forward, its hand pressed against the glass as though it was trying to reach out to him. The reflection's face contorted into something almost unrecognizable, a grotesque version of himself that seemed to mock him, to laugh at his torment. John froze, unable to move. The reflection slowly turned its head, its eyes locking onto his, and with a twisted smile, it whispered the same words again. "I am you, and you are me. You will be replaced." John tried to scream, but no sound came out. He felt a cold hand grasp his wrist, and before he knew it, he was being pulled toward the mirror, his own body fighting against him, but it was no use. The reflection had already taken control. As John was sucked into the mirror, he could feel his very essence slipping away, replaced by the reflection that now stood in his place. He was trapped, lost in the world behind the glass, with no way out. The mirror man had won. But here's the twist, every time someone stands before that mirror, the reflection looks just like them, as if nothing had changed. The mirror waits for the next person to claim as its own, and when the time is right, it will replace them too. And so, the cycle continues, as the mirror waits for its next victim. Is it you? Or will you be the one to stop it? Friends, don't let this story end with you. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another chilling tale. You never know what could be lurking in the reflection. Note, the story was written to fit within the tone of suspense and twists, using simple language while maintaining the chilling essence.